Hi, and welcome back to yet another video. This is the 21st episode of the story about the time when Sasuke gives his sharingan eyes to Naruto on verge death in waves. Let's watch as Naruto Uzumaki, Uchiha takes world by storm. After you've finished watching, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Naruto let the sun's rays wash over him while lying in the sand of a hidden inlet on the shore. He looked over at the naked black-haired girl dozing on her stomach and sighed contentedly as she shifted into a different position. Life didn't get much better. The Chunin grinned and pushed himself up before jumping in the warm water to rinse the sand covering his back off. He saw the brightly colored reef that surrounded the island in the distance and decided to explore for a little after catching a few glimpses of the tropical fish schooling around it. Naruto created a bubble of futon chakra around his head that allowed him to see the vivid colors and dazzling patterns of coral and fish clearly, and by refreshing the air with oxygen naturally in the water he was able to breathe as well. The Chunin explored the underwater world with childish curiosity and lost track of time while discovering the many interesting creatures that inhabited it. He pretended to be some type of explorer chronicling a lost world and watched the events with his sharingan unveiled. 4-foot-long eels bolted out of holes in the coral and grabbed small fish as they swam by before returning to their lair. Blue crabs with a massive pincer fenced with each other until one managed to rip the other's claw off and win the best crags in the reef, along with the females around it. Fierce-looking predatory fish cornered their prey into tight spaces where they couldn't escape while the remaining bait fish avoided less experienced hunters that were forced to eat scraps. When an 8-foot shark swam past, he was awed by the grace and power of its muscular body and eyed it warily. But the ancient killer quickly moved away from the shinobi, possibly identifying him as another apex predator. Naruto was so fascinated by the strange, alien world of the reef that he lost track of time and didn't return to the beach for an hour, where he found the attractive black-haired girl crying on the ground. When the shinobi emerged from the water, she got up and hobbled over before wrapping her arms around him. "Thank God you're okay. I thought you drowned and left me stranded." Naruto patted the sobbing girl's back before and walked her over to their clothes, where he wiped the tears away from her violet eyes with a towel. "Relax, Natsumi, I'm a ninja and would never let myself die like that. Besides, it's not that hard to get out of here." The blonde pointed out to the coral poking out of the water. "Since it's low tide you could have swam to the coral before walking back, and when it's high tide the current goes towards town. You could have easily swam to shore after it carried you past the cliffs." Natsumi hiccuped and lightly slapped the shinobi's chest. "Idiot, I wasn't thinking like that. I was worried about you." The Chunin laughed as he slipped on his orange bathing suit and let the black-haired teenager get dressed as well before scooping her up bridal style. "Thanks, but you didn't need to cry. I'd never die and leave a pretty girl helpless." Natsumi blushed, let out an eep when the blonde jumped into the air before running up the jagged cliff and descending the other side just as quickly. Naruto easily navigated the rocky field separating the cliffs from the main path, jumping from boulder to boulder until they reached the smooth road where he placed the curvy teenager on her feet. "Here we are. I'd walk back with you but your boyfriend probably wouldn't like it." "Oh shit, when did I say that?" The girl's bright yellow fingernails contrasted sharply with her tan skin after her dainty hands shot up and covered her mouth in shock. Naruto grinned while scratching the back of his head. "I don't remember the exact moment, but at one point you screamed out, 'You were so much better than my boyfriend.'" Natsumi looked like she was about to cry again. "Now you probably think I'm a slut and don't want anything to do with me." The girl ran towards town as Naruto called out, "Of course not," but she didn't stop or turn around and the shinobi sighed, "Damn it." The Chunin let Natsumi run down the trail and pushed her out of his mind. It was hard to care about much in this weather and the Lizzie atmosphere didn't help either. Naruto started to wonder how people ever accomplished anything in Tsuki no Kuni before sweat dropping as he remembered this wasn't technically Moon Country, it was a small protectorate about 5 miles off the country's eastern coast. They were kicked off the main island when Jiraiya was found peeping on the changing room of the bikini contest, and even now Naruto was wondering how a legendary shinobi could get caught like that. The teen brushed the thought away and waved at some people passing by. He was enjoying himself too much to worry about things like that. The weather was perfect every day. Enough famous people and nobles vacationed here that he didn't have to hide his identity, and everyone was really nice. Except those 4 at the restaurant. Flashback: Naruto and Jiraiya were sitting in a VIP booth at Kozue, one of the small island's best restaurants, while the teenager eagerly looked over the menu. The boat that ferried them to the protectorate had the worst food, and he didn't even get to have a full meal on the main island. After thinking about the reason why, the blonde glared at his sensei, but the man was oblivious to the outside world. The senin's chin rested on his palm while he stared out the window with a faraway look in his dark eyes. The Uzumaki decided not to torture his godfather now. He already took one of the ridiculous wallets Jiraiya carried around, and that was a good start. While contemplating further payback, the Uzumaki looked into the aisle and saw a 6-year-old girl with green eyes and blonde hair pulled into small pigtails on the sides of her head. She was staring up at him expectantly and nervously twisted her right foot while asking, Mr. Naruto sir, can I have your autograph please? The blonde's face lit up and a smile stretched across his whiskered cheeks as he gently took a small autograph book from her. Of course, do you have a pen? The child's face dropped as she looked to the ground and shook her head no, but the Chunin smiled wider. That's okay. The girl looked up and watched as Naruto pulled out a small square of paper before it was covered by a puff of smoke. When the tiny cloud dissipated, there was a pen in his hand and the girl laughed while he signed her small book. The shinobi was still grinning after he handed the notebook back and watched the girl's eyes sparkle as she gave him a toothy grin. Here you go. Thank you Mr. Naruto. The child clutched the notebook to her chest as she ran back to her parents, who were giving him an appreciative wave. The blonde returned the gesture, but when he looked back into the aisle there was a long line of children and some younger teenagers waiting to get his autograph too. The Jinchuriki couldn't help but smile as a 9-year-old boy with short brown hair and green eyes looked at him hopefully. The Jinchuriki happily took the napkin he was clutching and signed his name before waving the next child forward while shouting, "Don't be shy, I'll sign an autograph for everybody who wants one before I leave." The line seemed to multiply as soon as Naruto finished. Even the restaurant manager lined up to get signatures for the staff so they would keep working. The blonde gladly signed anything that was brought in front of him, napkins, autograph books, the building's wall, and even a few figurines of himself, but after a while he noticed 4 people at a nearby table that were snickering amongst themselves while shooting dirty glances at him every few minutes. There were 2 men and women sitting at the rectangular table. One woman was incredibly attractive and wore a tight black dress cut in the right places to show off her curvy physique. She had long red hair in a tight braid that went down her neck and came over her shoulder before the tip stopped right above her ample cleavage. Her purple eyes shone with disdain when she quickly looked in his direction before focusing back on the muscular man sitting next to her. Her date wore a black sports jacket over a silver-collared shirt and long black pants despite the heat, and since he was wearing sunglasses Naruto couldn't see his eyes. The man ran his large hand through his slicked-back black hair and laughed loudly when the plump woman on the other side of the table finished talking. She had short blonde hair with every strand meticulously combed back so it all went behind her ears that had large gold hoops dangling from them and curled back to the base of her chin. She wore a puffy white fur coat that came down to the floor while doing little to hide her round frame, and when she turned to sneer at Naruto he saw a frilly red dress underneath her coat and a large gold necklace that was studded with diamonds and had a rose pendant made of rubies and emeralds hanging above her breasts. She stared at the Jinchuriki like he was nothing with her cold green eyes, but the teenager had years of practice pretending to ignore those looks, and it was a lot easier with a line of people excited to get his autograph. The woman turned around after several seconds and reached over to pull at the khaki shorts of the skinny guy next to her, who appeared reluctant to be there. It seemed like the man wanted to move away badly, but was forcing himself to stay while she ran her hand up and down his thigh, getting closer to his genitals with every pass. Instead of shifting away he slightly turned his body to give the woman better access and put on a plastic smile so wide his blue eyes squinted shut. The woman gave his crotch a long fondle before slowly moving away, much to the man's relief. He pulled at the collar of his red polo shirt before scratching his orange hair, and when the woman glanced over at him with a sultry smile he tried to appear eager before focusing on his food. Naruto shifted his focus from them to the line of people waiting for an autograph and the free meal given to him by the manager. When he finished both nearly an hour later the 4 people were still at the table, except their food was gone and replaced by cocktails. Apparently the group had been drinking for quite some time because any semblance of subtlety was gone and they were staring directly at him while laughing mockingly. Deciding he had enough, the Chunin stood up and approached their table before asking, "Do you guys have a problem?" The attractive woman gave him a haughty smile. "No, just remembering the time after I made my first movie. It's almost cute how pathetic and attention-hungry you are." The other 3 cackled when she took a sip of her drink, but the plump woman stopped after a few seconds and said, "You're new in the industry so I'll give you a piece of free advice. Don't talk to your betters, Gaki." Naruto smirked at the 4 of them. "Well, it's a good thing I don't see any here." They stopped laughing and glared at him while the muscular man responded, "Watch your mouth, small fry." The actress's purple eyes flashed with venom when she replied, "The kid talks big but was horrible in the movie. Did you see the way he constantly screamed and overreacted to everything?" The woman laughed condescendingly before continuing, "The sad thing is he wasn't even supposed to be acting." The skinny man grinned while looking up at the Chunin. "When I started the dropouts in my class didn't even act like that, maybe he's just that much of a loser in real life." The man shivered when the plump blonde next to him squeezed his upper thigh with her swollen hand and continued, "The brat got lucky he worked with that whiny Princess Fujikaze. She can make anyone look good, even the talentless idiot Makino. The man would be starving if he wasn't the only person that bitch would act for." The idiot couldn't direct his way out of a paper bag, and all the movies besides The Princess Few and One have flopped. But he's still the highest paid director. His action commentary would have failed too if it wasn't focused on that cunt. But it outsold everything but Icha because it turns out the slut is a real princess. Naruto growled lightly when she insulted Koyuki. "It sounds like you're a bitter old soul to me since our action commentary sold more than all of your movies. I don't even want to be an actor or director, but the only thing I've done is better than anything you've put out. If any of you had talent like Makino or Koyuki, then you'd make good movies too, but none of you do. You're just a bunch of jealous hacks. In fact, I don't even know who any of you are." The female director's green eyes shone with rage as her shrill voice rang out, "I never said it was better, just outsold. So more people liked our movie and paid to see it than yours," was the Chunin's quick response. The muscular actor sneered at the blonde. "Listen here, you little punk, shut up." Naruto cut the man off and snarled, "You guys may play heroes on a movie screen, but I am one in real life. Maybe you should learn to respect your betters instead of insulting me because your jealous people asked for my autograph and not yours." The red-haired actress slapped the table. "I've had enough of your mouth," and looked over towards two shinobi from Moon Country with green hair sitting nearby. "Get over here." They both wore gray flak jackets over black t-shirts, and dark purple shinobi pants with gray sandals that matched their vests, although one had gray eyes and the other had blue. Naruto saw the two when he walked in and recognized the Getsu symbol on their purple Hittite. But he didn't think they were here on a contract since there was a jug of sake on their table. The woman gave him an arrogant look as the two ninja hesitantly walked over, and when they stood next to the table she said, "Take care of this punk." The Getsugaku Chunin looked at the blonde nervously. They had seen him in action in the movie and he looked tougher in real life. The two shared a look before the taller one with gray eyes responded, "Sorry lady, our job is to defend you from attacks, not fight somebody when they make you mad. Me and my brother aren't your personal thugs." The two shinobi went back to their table while the overweight director hissed, "Cowards." The bulky actor stood up and pounded his drink before slamming the empty glass down. "We can ruin your life, so go sit down like a good boy." Naruto's blue eye narrowed as he projected a small amount of killing intent towards the table, and once he had their attention slowly increased the pressure so they didn't pass out. The four celebrities quivered as images of their death flashed before their eyes, and half a minute later they all defecated themselves. The women start crying when cameras in the restaurant flashed rapidly, capturing the shit dripping down their legs, before running for the door with the two men behind them. Flashback, and the blonde shook himself out of his thoughts and looked up at the sky. It was still pretty early and he should get some training in, but the weather was so nice it made him want to forget about everything and go to the beach. He made some good progress on the chakra beams and could create them from any point on his body, but couldn't get them to bend. The Chunin shrugged and turned towards the ocean. He wouldn't be able to make any progress if training wasn't his main focus. When Naruto got there he noticed a crowd in the distance. "I wonder what that is." The Chunin blocked the sun with his hand to get a better look but still couldn't make out any details behind the mass of people. The blonde knew he should ignore it, but curiosity pushed him towards the crowd. Kuji walked in front of the carriage to clear a path for it while Shikamaru and Dino covered the flanks and Asuma guarded the rear. The Chunin were excited after hearing their old sensei would be leading them for the first time since the Chunin exams, but that quickly disappeared as the mission progressed. Their team had to guard Michiru, the prince of Tsuki no Kuni, and his son Hikaru on a trip around the world. At first it seemed like an ideal mission for Shikamaru, but after a few days the behavior of the two nobles became grating. They viewed people as objects and completely ignored their feelings on the matter, acting as if each individual had a value and could be bought or sold on a whim. To them, human beings were expandable. Michiru and Hikaru weren't evil, but they were so rich that nothing was beyond their means. Whenever something interested them the two nobles would immediately buy it, and once the object became boring they would cast it aside and buy something else. The nobles had 6 more carriages piled high with their souvenirs, and all of it together was probably worth more than most shinobi would make performing missions over their entire career. Once they got into the main streets people moved back and cleared a path, allowing the caravan to pass without a hassle while they clapped and whistled for the ruling family. The cheers faded as the carriages rolled through the gates, and the shinobi sighed in relief knowing their job was almost over. The 4 stayed in formation and followed a path that began winding through dunes covered in thick grass. Shikamaru froze for a split second, but he quickly recovered and cast a sideways glance at Asuma who lit a cigarette. "Time for a smoke break." Team 10 led the carriage into the shade of a dune as the Jounin enjoyed the potent tobacco, but when it neared the filter he flicked it away and pulled out another. As the man reached into his pocket to grab the lighter, a masked shinobi that had a black bandana covering his hair and right eye jumped out of the tall grass and dashed towards the carriage. His black sandals kicked up sand as a kunai slid out of the long sleeve of his green jumpsuit and he lunged towards the carriage. Shikamaru's cage mane forced the assassin to retreat and he stared at Team 10 with his cold blue eye as they took up positions in front of the carriage. The assassin threw a dozen shuriken towards the konohanin with his left hand, but Ino easily deflected the projectiles with some of her own while Kuji's fist grew and extended towards their opponent, forcing him to quick-step backwards. The masked shinobi turned and coated his kunai and futon chakra to counter Asuma's trench knives and used the man's body to push away as the Akimichi's fist barreled towards his back. The Sarutobi was knocked off balance by the move, but still managed to avoid his student's fist without much effort. However, a path to the carriage was wide open. He could intercept the assassin if he tried, but the Jounin knew they weren't in any real danger since the initial attack and wanted to see how his students fared. Ino was the closest and jumped in front of the carriage while pulling out her Tosen, which glowed fiery red as the one-eyed shinobi got close. He ducked under one as it slashed towards his neck and forced the kunoichi to block his kunai with the fan in her left hand as it stabbed towards her stomach. The blade slowly melted once it came in contact with the scorching metal and the assassin dropped it while rolling left to avoid the Tosen slashing towards his ribcage. Ino pivoted and swung the left Tosen towards her opponent while he stood up, but the assassin leaned backwards, and when the bladed fan passed over his head pushed her elbow out wide, which forced the blonde to keep spinning, exposing her back as he pulled out another kunai. Their exchange had only taken 3 seconds, but it was enough time for her teammates to recover. Kuji had performed the Baiken no Jutsu after wrapping wire around his body that had kunai tied down its length, which increased his traction in the sand. He rolled towards the assassin and forced him to abandon his attack. The spiked ball missed Ino by inches as the masked nin jumped on top of it, careful to avoid the sharp kunai on the outside. A few seconds later the mysterious shinobi regained his balance before performing a series of hand seals, and when it was complete he jumped off Kuji while thrusting his hands forward. Futon, Daitapa. The wall of wind caused the Akimichi to accelerate and he rolled away from the battle while the masked shinobi charged towards Shikamaru, but the Nar didn't take a defensive stance as their opponent neared and let out a sigh before saying, "Do we really have to do this, Naruto?" The assassin stopped and let out a loud groan while the other Chunin looked over in surprise and Asuma smiled. The disguised shinobi started laughing while reaching up to undo his bandana and mask, and when they fell towards the ground he said, "Can't slip anything past you, Shikamaru." Naruto pulled off the bodysuit, revealing his plain orange swimming trunks, and resealed everything while Shikamaru spoke up, "It wasn't that hard to figure out. There were multiple times you had a clear path to the carriage and ignored it when a real assassin would have gone for the kill, unless one of us was your target. When Asuma stopped fighting I realized there wasn't any danger, and after that it wasn't hard to put the rest together. You have one blue eye, a wind affinity, and are the only person I know troublesome enough to do this." Naruto chuckled as he shook his friend's hand before grabbing the back of his head and hissing in pain. He turned around slowly and saw Ino glaring at him with evil shining in her sky blue eyes while she yelled, "What was that for, asshole?" The Uzumaki gulped as he stared at the fierce kunoichi and silently cursed. After dealing with civilian girls the past few months the blonde forgot how scary the ones he knew were. Naruto lifted his hands up peacefully and apologized, "Sorry Ino, it was just a joke. I was only trying to have some fun. Besides, it let me see how much you've grown." The Yamanaka blushed when the blonde complimented her while letting his eye quickly run up and down her frame. Naruto smiled as her anger started to dissipate. Apparently compliments worked on kunoichi too. "Seriously Ino, when did you learn to kick so much ass?" The Yamanaka playfully slapped him. "Geez Naruto, you go away for a couple months and suddenly have some charm." The Jinchuriki scratched the back of his head embarrassedly. "Come on, don't give me that much credit. It's been closer to a year. If you two are done flirting we have a mission to continue." Naruto was used to Jiraiya's antics so he wasn't fazed when the Jounin goaded them, but Ino quickly turned around and whined, "Asuma-sensei," as the man gave her a teasing grin. "I'd rather not continue it though," mumbled Shikamaru before the carriage door swung open, and all of Team 10 sighed before the Nara said, "Troublesome." A child that had black hair sticking up on the back of his head with long bangs combed to the sides so he could see rushed out of the carriage. The boy had glasses over his brown eyes and wore a white robe made of silk that came down to his knees with a pattern of light blue triangles around the wide collar. A black sash was tied around his waist that held up the gray pants while he ran across the ground in his fine black shoes as a voice called out of the carriage, Wait Hikaru, it's dangerous out there. A chubby man wearing a sleeveless blue kimono with sky blue trim on the edges and a white sash with golden borders that stretched over his ample torso shuffled out after the child. He had an orange hat on over his straight black hair that stopped at his neck, and two gaudy necklaces around his neck. One was made of 30 ruby beads the size of grapes, and the other was a thin platinum chain with 5 different colored triangles made from precious gems hanging from the end. The man was breathing heavily after running a dozen feet, and Asuma lit another cigarette while shaking his head. Don't worry Michiru-sama, we're in no danger. The assassin wasn't real. He was just a member of our village that happened to be in the area and was playing a prank on us. Hikaru wasn't paying attention to Asuma and walked up to the blonde shinobi. Why did you stop fighting? It was so cool. Naruto smiled at the boy as he jumped around while pretending to attack an invisible opponent. I was just having some fun with my friends, but fighting like that is dangerous and I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Hikaru frowned. I don't care about that. You can have anything if you keep fighting. I'm not for sale, brat. Naruto tried to ignore the hypocrisy of that statement, but to him there was a big difference between fighting for Konoha and some boys' amusement. Besides, according to Jiraiya, he had enough money to live comfortably his entire life without working. He didn't need the kid's piggy bank. Hikaru could tell the blonde wasn't paying attention to him, something that never happened before, and he didn't like it. The boy was the grandson of Tsuki no Kuni's daimyo and eventual heir to the throne. Whenever he asked for something, people dropped everything and made it happen. Hikaru was about to explode at the shinobi when his father placed a hand on his shoulder. Everything my son says is true. If the fight continues, I shall fulfill any desire you have. When Michiru finished, Naruto felt his resolve waver. Judging from the servants and number of wagons stuffed with valuable souvenirs, these people were incredibly wealthy, and there were quite a few things he wouldn't mind having. Hikaru smirked as he watched the Chunin. People may not take him seriously due to his age, but when his father spoke they always caved. Naruto saw the prince's son give him an arrogant look and his blue eye hardened. He wouldn't give it on principle now, and nobody was as stubborn as him. I'm a person, not an object. There's no price tag that instantly makes me into a robot. If I don't want to do something, then I won't, and I don't want to fight my friends. Michiru was visibly shocked by the blonde's willpower. He had only come across a handful of people outside of his father that ever refused him. He frowned and ignored Hikaru, who was screaming at Naruto. The prince hated when people said no. It always reminded him of her. Michiru broke that train of thought before it took a darker turn and playfully picked up his son before swinging around to look at Asuma. Don't worry my child, we shall see a fight soon. Jounin-san, how much would it cost to add another guard? The Sarutobi raised his eyebrow while flicking a cigarette away. This guy wouldn't give up. It's not standard procedure to add someone to the mission halfway through, and Naruto is one of our more high-profile shinobi. Money is no issue. Asuma nodded. If that's the case, it's his decision. The one-eyed shinobi considered his options. Jiraiya had probably already snuck back onto the main island to see the bikini contest, and he wasn't getting any training done, so there was no reason to stay here. There was also the added bonus of catching up with Team 10 and possibly getting wind manipulation tips from Asuma. The blonde looked over at the two nobles staring at him expectantly. Their behavior was obnoxious, and the thought of putting up with the royal duo for an extended period of time almost made him blurt out no. However, the aggravation he caused by refusing them almost balanced it out. I'll tag along. Michiru and his son grinned triumphantly until the blonde continued, but I'm only fighting if we get attacked, not for your amusement. The prince's excitement visibly lessened, but he knew from experience people couldn't say no when they truly comprehended his wealth. The boy was able to refuse now, but after realizing what he was turning down, his resolve would waver. What else did people want besides money or the luxuries it brought? Michiru was confident in his eventual success and clapped his hands happily. Excellent, let's get going. Naruto nodded as the nobles walked back to their carriage. Okay, I just need to get into actual clothes. The Uzumaki ran behind a dune to change quickly, and a few minutes later jumped over it wearing his mission outfit. Shikamaru looked over when the blonde landed and bent down before drawing a circle in the sand with his finger. Okay, we have to create a new formation since Naruto is joining us. Kuji can stay up front as our initial wall of defense. Asuma is the strongest, so he'll guard the rear. That way he can make a decision about who to support. There is more grass and dunes on the left side, so Naruto will be there. His shadow clones can trail the carriage and he'll be able to react quickest because of the info they send out. The right side is mostly open ground and we'll see an attack coming from the distance, so Ino can stay there. Meanwhile, I'll be sitting on top of the main carriage to get a better vantage point of the situation so I can use my shadows better. I'm calling bullshit. The Nara looked over at his blonde teammate after putting an X in the middle of the circle representing the carriage. "You just gave Naruto your spot so you can take a nap while we walk." The lazy Chunin grunted and cleaned out his left ear with his pinky finger. "I'm not going to be napping, Ino. Our original formation is the best way to guard a moving target and I just modified it to give me a better view of things. If I know what's going on earlier I can use my shadows to shape the battlefield and change the plan accordingly. Of course I'll have to lay down on top of the carriage for the best cover." Asuma chuckled as the Yamanaka started poking Shikamaru in the space between his flak jacket. "At least try to make a better line next time, asshole." Every shinobi worth their salt knows to use the pentagonal formation to guard a moving target with a 5-man team. The Nara sighed as his teammate's sharp nail jabbed into his chest. "Troublesome woman, Naruto can support the right flank from the rear and Asuma will shift left." Naruto smiled as Team 10 walked away while Ino grumbled, but she slowly fell behind the other three before accentuating the motion of her hips. The Uzumaki's eyes were naturally drawn to the kunoichi's butt, but he managed to look away after a few moments. If the Jinchuriki wanted to maintain any possibility of repairing his relationship with Sakura, he probably shouldn't sleep with her best friend and rival. A portly man let out a satisfied moan after swallowing his food and drank from a saucer of sake that was refilled by a servant once it was put down. He sat in a golden throne padded with maroon cushions made of velvet, which was placed at the head of a 30-foot-long white pine table that matched the wood floors. The man wore a pink sash over a purple kimono made of silk while 4 gold loops stacked on top of each other covered his flabby neck. His short brown hair had 2 tufts sticking out on either side that resembled horns while his sideburns went past his large ears before curving up to meet his mustache. Light reflected off the golden rings on his ivory chopsticks while he savored a plate of finely cooked beef with a side of caviar and hollowed-out radishes. The man let out another appreciative groan as he relished the juicy steak before slurping down a mouthful of caviar and tossing the vegetable aside. Life didn't get much better. Shabadaba was a noble in the Tsuki daimyo's court and didn't want for much, but even he was jealous of the luxury that surrounded the royal family. Most people on the island had never seen food like this. Radishes grow in cold climates and beef was a rarity since there wasn't enough land to raise cattle in Moon Country, yet this cottage had a freezer filled with enough rare delicacies to feed a small village for a year. Shabadaba ran his hands over the polished table and looked at the matching pine floors. The cost of importing this lumber alone would build several peasants a house, yet all the floors and furniture in the summer cottage were made of the soft wood, despite its exorbitant price. The man smiled as he slowly chewed another piece of the succulent meat. It's no wonder Michiru got fat living like this. Surrounded by the finest accoutrements money could buy, only eating the rarest delicacies. Yes, I could easily get used to being the daimyo. The man pushed his empty plate away and looked at the paintings hanging from the green walls. All of Tsuki no Kuni's former daimyo struck regal poses while holding ornate weapons decorated by priceless gems, and those ceremonial armaments were in glass display cases underneath the paintings. I wonder what I should pick as my weapon. A poleaxe would be truly frightening, but it wouldn't set me apart. I need something unique, something that accurately reflects my glory. Before the noble could put much thought into his future, the large doors at the far end of the room swung open and 3 teenagers walked in. 2 boys flanked a shorter girl with short black hair cropped at her neck and cold black eyes. A sleeveless purple shirt hugged her petite frame while tight black shorts stopped halfway down her thighs and exposed her toned legs, which drew Shabadaba's eyes towards the purple sandals on her feet. The boy on her right had gray hair that covered his right eye and was rather effeminate, wearing green lipstick with matching eyeliner around his beady left eye while a necklace of red prayer hung around his neck. He had on a yellow tunic that stopped above his knees with black trimming around the edges while black shinobi pants were tucked into white bandages that went down his shins and into brown sandals. The teenager on her left had white hair that framed his face while his striking purple eyes had black lining around them. He wore a light blue shirt and black shinobi pants that went into white bandages that stopped above his blue sandals. The pudgy noble had seen enough Getsunin to realize these were shinobi, but he couldn't find anything to identify their allegiance. As soon as the teenagers took a step into the room, Shabadaba's personal guard appeared behind him. There was a muscular man with beady black eyes and spiked brown hair that resembled Jiraiya's and stopped at his shoulder blades. He wore a long-sleeved green shirt under a tan vest that matched his pants and kabuki sandals. The shinobi had a metal band wrapped around his forehead that had no symbol and reflected light as he reached up to scratch his large nose. The large man smiled dumbly at the 3 teenagers as he pulled on black gloves before looking over at the orange-haired shinobi on his left. The shorter man had a hair similar to the brute next to him that stopped at his waist and bright blue eyes that scrutinized the Otonin as he took a defensive stance, shifting his kabuki sandals across the floor. Like the other shinobi, he wore a plain metal headband and a cream pants that matched his vest, but underneath it had on a sleeveless blue shirt. The orange-haired man only had a glove on his right hand and held a kunai in the other. The woman on his left had spiky blue hair that stopped at her shoulders while two long strands framed her face and came down to her chin. She had on the same blank metal headband as the other two, but wore a long-sleeved maroon dress, the same color as her eyes, under a cream-colored jersey vest that matched her leather boots and gloves. Shabadaba visibly calmed down after his shinobi appeared and looked at the three teenagers confidently while waving the servants away. When they were out of the room, he pulled a lever under the table, which closed the doors as a privacy seal. Glowed along the walls. "Who are you and how did you get in here?" Isaribi looked around nervously, so Sakan smiled and took the lead. The effeminate shinobi raised his arms peacefully while holding a hitayate bearing a musical note in his right hand. "Relax guys, we're not here to cause problems." When the Otonin finished, Hukon's head emerged next to his. "Yeah, there's no need to worry. Why would Orochimaru-sama destroy something he has been investing in for the past 6 months?" The three shinobi around Shabadaba didn't react noticeably, although they did drop their guard after the display. However, their employer was visibly disturbed and stumbled over his words while asking, What do you mean? Wyruhh here T then?" Suigetsu cited his teammates' dramatic methods. Even if Orochimaru had no intention of letting this idiot rule the country, there was no reason to freak him out. Better to play along and make everything easier at the end. The former Kirinin could see Sakan and Ukon were about to continue their act, so he stepped in. "Forgive my eccentric teammate." What he meant to say was the prince is returning with his son. They will be here in 2 days with an escort of Konoha shinobi. Sakan glared at the white-haired shinobi's back as Shabadaba visibly relaxed and leaned back in the throne. "Excellent, now we can put the plan into motion." Suigetsu cocked his head over towards the noble shinobi who still hadn't taken defensive postures. "It better be a good one. These losers won't be worth a damn if they were scared by a little trick." The three ninja he was looking at dissolved into rose petals before dropping down from the ceiling, landing directly behind the sound shinobi. The muscular one held a massive halberd, a 7-foot-long weapon that came to a deadly point with a 2-foot-long curved axe blade on one side, and a 3-foot spike protruding out of the other. The brown-haired man easily lifted the imposing weapon with one hand and pointed it at the Otonin while speaking in a baritone voice. "Perhaps you should not underestimate us." Suigetsu scoffed as he turned around and separated his torso around the halberd while walking towards its surprised wielder. After reaching the muscular shinobi's elbow, he turned around and put an arm around the unaffiliated nin's shoulder in a friendly manner while his body solidified. The man's eyes shot open and he let out a growl. "I can't move my arm." The former Kirinin smiled widely, revealing his shark-like teeth. "I think my first impression was correct. That Kawamiri Genjutsu combination was so shoddy an academy student would have seen it. You three almost wet your pants at Sakan's jutsu. That wasn't an illusion." Shabadaba could see the white-haired Otonin was embarrassing Kongo, so he coughed lightly into his hand. "Our plan should require no violence. We've written up a false case against the daimyo for treason and shall overthrow him legally. The contract binds the team to Michiru until they reach their destination, which is here, and when they arrive we shall arrest the prince and his son. The Konohanin won't be able to interfere because it is an internal affair of Tsuki no Kuni." Suigetsu kept his face level, but internally he was cursing. There was no way Shabadaba's plan would work. "Fine, you may proceed with that course, but Orochimaru has an investment in this country, so we shall stay and watch from the shadows." The Hozuki freed Kongo by liquefying his body before walking away without waiting for a response, and his teammates followed him out the door. They traveled through the artificial woods surrounding the mansion in silence and walked out the gate several minutes later. Sakan watched Isaribi stare longingly at the former Kirinin's back as they followed a trail that led to the beach and snarled after hearing Ukon's voice in his head. "Are you going to let Suigetsu walk over us like that? We were Orochimaru's bodyguards and have seniority over that white-haired punk." Sakan nodded when his brother finished and remained silent until they came to a stop on the beach a few minutes later. Suigetsu appeared to be lost in thought while staring over the ocean, and the effeminate shinobi growled at being ignored. "Listen up, you shark-toothed cocksucker, don't interrupt me like that again. I'm the most senior shinobi here." Zabuza's former apprentice snorted as he turned around. "You may be the most senior Otonin here, but I was raised in a real shinobi village. Besides, Orochimaru put Isaribi in charge of the squad, or are you saying that your judgment is better than his?" Sakan laughed mockingly before responding, "Of course not, idiot. I would never question Orochimaru-sama." The effeminate teenager wrapped his arm around the girl's lower back and pulled her close. She stiffened at the contact and twisted in Sakan's grip to face away from him. "Isaribi will be a great kunoichi soon. But she hasn't been training for that long. The former leader of the Sound Force smiled down at his black-haired teammate before moving his arm towards her shapely rear, making the girl wince. Me and Ukon can help. Why don't we ditch this jerk and you can show us some moves? Isaribi wasn't used to being complimented or positive contact and usually appreciated it, but she never liked the way Sakon or his brother acted towards her. The girl shifted out of the Otonin's grip when his fingers brushed against her butt and quietly answered, "That's okay, we should be ready at all times in case the prince arrives early." The effeminate shinobi moved towards the girl and she shuffled away until Suigetsu stepped between them. "Stop acting like a creep, it's making Isaribi uncomfortable. Besides, you and Ukon wouldn't be able to satisfy a woman working together." The shinobi stepped towards each other and it appeared they were about to come to blows when Isaribi raised her voice. "Enough." The two of them looked at her as she continued in a softer tone, "We're here to ensure the coup succeeds for Orochimaru-sama." The boys scoffed before turning away from each other and Isaribi walked down the beach. Sakon headed into the dunes after spitting at Suigetsu's feet, but the former Kirinin paid him no attention. He looked at the black-haired girl's back and shook his head. Isaribi was nicer than most of the douches in Otogakure, but like everyone else she had been brainwashed by Orochimaru and was blindly loyal to him. Suigetsu knew what the snake-like man was really like and would never trust him, but for now he had nowhere else to go. Yagura wouldn't welcome him back with open arms, and he didn't exactly make friends with anyone in the rebellion. The Hozuki's best chance for survival was to stay put and play along until there was an opportunity to leave, but he'd always be watching his back. The royal carriage came to a stop and Michiru excitedly waddled towards a plain one-story house with white siding sitting in front of fields filled with fruits, vegetables, flowers, and small livestock pens that held chickens, goats, sheep, and pigs. Hikaru slowly left the carriage before hesitantly following his father to the door, and after he arrived the man knocked several times. It opened a few minutes later revealing a brown-eyed woman with black hair and a simple ponytail going down her back. She wore a white t-shirt and loose-fitting jeans that were stained by dirt and sweat, along with unlaced work boots that were caked with mud, yet it was still easy to see her beauty underneath all the grime. The woman appeared confused as she took in the chubby man until her dirty hands shot up and covered her chapped lips. "Michiru, is that you?" The prince grinned and nodded, but she ignored him and focused on the boy hiding behind his pudgy legs. Tears shone in the woman's expressive brown eyes as she whispered out, Hikaru, are you Hikaru?" The boy nodded timidly and she easily pushed the portly man aside before embracing him tightly. "Oh my son, my son." The child's eyes widened as he desperately grabbed the woman and started trembling. "Mommy. It's okay my little moonbeam, I'm here." Michiru watched the two of them embrace and fought down the jealousy rising in his chest before the feeling was replaced by shame. The last time Hikaru was embraced by his mother was 4 years ago, he might not even remember. The prince looked away from the scene until they finished a few minutes later and his ex-wife scooped the boy up before shifting him to her back. "Come my son, let me show you the farm." The prince kept his distance as Ameo gave their child a tour of the fields. She took him through the small orchard of citrus trees where she let him pick an orange and eat it. The woman also grew melons, a variety of squash, a small patch of corn, and eggplant. Hikaru laughed when she let him play with the livestock, and whenever he smiled Ameo's face lit up, which made the prince remember the times he was the reason for that glow. The boy spent over an hour outside with his mother, and when the tour was finished she took him back to the house and opened the door. "Why don't you go in and wash up Hikaru? When you're done I'll make you a nice fresh sandwich." The boy nodded and hurried inside while Ameo turned towards her ex-husband and stared at him with frosty brown eyes. "What do you want Michiru?" The prince turned away from the woman's condemning stare while answering, I wanted Hikaru to see his mother, he needs you. And so do I. Please come back Ameo, the happiness that used to fill my days is gone, only emptiness remains. You've tried your best to fill it I see. I could hardly recognize you at first. Michiru's ex-wife eyed his ample stomach and the man's humiliation was apparent when he grabbed it. "I couldn't stop eating when you left. It was the only thing that brought me comfort, even if it only lasted a few moments." The woman snorted, "Well you should have tried exercising instead." The prince continued staring at the ground. "Please come back Ameo, I'll drop the weight and do anything you want. Just name it and it shall be yours, mansions, jewelry, art. Just come back to me." Michiru still couldn't look his ex-wife in the face, but he heard the anger in her melodic voice. "You still don't understand why I left. I'm perfectly happy here tending my fields and taking care of the animals. Expensive gifts won't win me back." The prince looked confused when she finished. "If you're happy farming that's fine. Let me buy you more land and livestock. I'll hire the best workers and you can run the most successful farm in Tsuki no Kuni, Name it and just stop. The pudgy man finally gathered the courage to look at Ameo's brown eyes. However, the pity there made him feel worse than her anger. You've changed so much, Michiru. You don't resemble the person I fell in love with anymore, physically or emotionally. Now you're just a pathetic man that uses our son as an excuse to see me, the son I haven't seen for 4 years because you got full custody and refused me visitation rights hoping I'd come back. You held my only child as a hostage. I'm sorry, I was so angry. Ameo wiped away the tears forming in her brown eyes and cut the prince off. It's too late for apologies, especially hollow ones. I want Hikaru 2 weeks during every month from now on, and I don't want you tagging along with him either. It's bad enough that you kept him from me, but you ruined him too. The woman snarled and slammed the door before Michiru slowly walked back to the carriage with no happiness in his usually jovial features. The prince remained inside until his son returned, and the caravan started moving once more as he looked anywhere but his ex-wife's house. As they traveled, the man kept glancing over at the daily menu his cooks supplied before forcing himself to look away. He needed food to escape from the misery plaguing him, but remembering what Ameo said about his weight helped him fight off the temptation. He just needed something else to think about. Michiru looked out the window a while before falling asleep, but after waking up his mood hadn't improved and Hikaru was being unusually quiet. The boy was concentrating on a small puzzle his mother had given him as a gift and was lost to the world until a large, colorful sign caught his eye. A circus, can we go, Dad? Michiru smiled as the boy pressed his face against the window. Maybe this would keep Ameo away from his thoughts. Of course my son, anything for you. The prince eagerly looked at the large tent that rose up in the distance while recalling his childhood memories of the circus. When they arrived, he waddled around the fairgrounds with Hikaru and watched acts like the strongman, bearded lady, fire breathers, and sword swallowers, but nothing could push the thoughts of his ex-wife away. Whenever Michiru saw his son's astonished stare, he only remembered the way Ameo's face lit up when they went to the circus and how happy that made him, a feeling that seemed foreign to him for so long. A vendor carrying large bags of popcorn walked by and the prince called him over before buying one. As he ate the treat, he was able to focus on the buttery flavor and crunchy texture, but as soon as it was gone, thoughts of his ex-wife returned along with the depression that accompanied them. Michiru sent servants out to the vendors to collect more for him, and as they walked through the fairgrounds he enjoyed the piles of junk food while Hikaru marveled at the performers. After hearing an announcement for the main show, the prince led his son into the tent and got seats in the front row by paying 10 times the ticket price to the previous owners, despite their children's protests. Servants took the cold food away before placing fresh dishes on a tray next to him, and Michiru started grabbing handfuls of it. Hikaru managed to snatch a piece of fried dough from his father's plate and watched as the ringmaster introduced the variety of acts. He saw trapeze artists risk their life performing unbelievable acrobatic feats nearly 50 feet above the ground. There was a dancing bear that was able to balance on a ball and roll around a ring, and 6 female performers flipped back and forth between the backs of 2 elephants that seemed to dance with each other, even standing on their hind legs at times. The boy was amazed when a dozen full-grown clowns got out of a carriage less than half the size of his father's before entertaining and amazing the crowd by enduring physical pain while barely avoiding serious injuries. Hikaru was forced to watch through his fingers while several of the clowns almost got killed by knives they threw into the air to pop balloons. A magician astounded the audience by making people levitate, sawing his assistant in half, and even becoming invisible, but the best part came at the end when the ringmaster introduced a rare, white saber-toothed tiger named Chamu. Hikaru had never seen anything like it in his life. The beast gracefully jumped through rings of fire, backflipped around the ring, climbed a rope before diving into a small pool they brought out, and when he roared, the boy's heart pumped like never before. He looked up at his father while his eyes sparkled with wonder. "Dad, can we buy the circus?" Michiru flinched as memories of Ameo flashed through his mind once more, but the man would never refuse his son simply because he was unhappy. What an excellent idea, Hikaru. Naruto's jaw dropped as the prince ordered his servants to find the ringleader and shook his head in disbelief. He's actually going to get the kid a circus. Asuma lit a cigarette and inhaled deeply before letting the smoke drift up into the air. He was sure Naruto already knew this well, but his students were rather privileged and needed a reminder now and then. Some people are just born luckier than others. As the sun descended into the horizon, the royal caravan arrived at the protectorate's largest port and found the boat that would bring them back to Tsuki no Kuni. The captain protested when he saw the train of carriages and insisted their luggage needed to be left behind for another ship, but Hikaru wasn't hearing any of it. The boy threw a tantrum that left everyone's ears ringing, and his father responded by quadrupling the fee. The captain looked hesitantly between the roll of money and mountain of luggage, but greed eventually won out over caution. His crew stuffed all the trunks in the bottom hold and managed to get the smaller animal crates into storage as well, but cages for Chamu, the elephants, camels, and other large animals couldn't fit through any of the storage holes and were secured to the deck before they set sail. A few hours later everyone was spread out in the mess hall for dinner. Naruto enjoyed some time away from the obnoxious nobles and talked with Team 10 about the past few months, although he was curious why they wouldn't discuss anything about Chunin exam except the final round. When dinner was finished the four teenagers sat in comfortable silence until Naruto looked around. "Where's Hikaru?" The other Chunin scanned the room, but nobody saw the small boy. Shikamaru groaned in annoyance while pushing himself up. "Troublesome. These sailors are directly employed by the daimyo and have been for years, so I doubt anybody took him, although it's always a possibility. Let's split up and try to find the kid before jumping to any conclusions though." Naruto ran towards the stairs that led to the deck and threw the door open after hearing a roar. The blonde found Chamu standing over Hikaru and realized the boy let the tiger out after seeing the lock in his hands. The Chunin cursed as he watched the beast raise its paw and disappeared in a blur. He managed to save the boy before he was hit, but the saber-tooth left a long scratch down his right leg. The blonde tossed Hikaru across the ground and turned as the tiger lunged towards him. He caught Chamu by his large teeth and twisted the creature's neck until he flopped to the ground. The animal struggled mightily against his iron grip for nearly a minute, futilely trying to maul the nimble shinobi with his claws, but eventually he submitted and went limp. Naruto gingerly let go and the tiger stayed prone for a few seconds before slowly getting up. Its yellow eyes stared respectfully at the Chunin for a moment before it walked back into the cage and laid down. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief and took the lock from Hikaru before putting it back on the saber-tooth's pen. When he was sure the door was secure he picked up the shaken child and put him on his feet. "Hey, I know the tiger is cool, but you can't let a dangerous animal out of its cage." Hikaru looked at the predator and felt the fear rising in his chest again, so he turned away. "I don't care about that thing, it's stupid." The blonde scratched his head as the child walked back downstairs and looked over at Chamu. "Sorry buddy." Naruto thought he saw the tiger roll his eyes and blinked rapidly a few times before shaking his head. The animal was intelligent, but there's no way it was that smart. Must be a Jiraku withdrawals. The Uzumaki walked back below deck and watched Hikaru go back to his father before sitting down. Naruto leaned against the wall and waited for Team 10 to come back while keeping half an eye on the child. When the other Chunin arrived Shikamaru decided to go to bed and Kuji went to clean up the remaining leftovers, leaving the two blondes alone. Ino leaned closer to the Uzumaki and asked, "Where was he?" Naruto looked down at the attractive Kunoichi and tried not to stare at her cleavage, although it appeared she wanted him to, just on the deck acting like a stupid kid. "Something you have plenty of experience doing." The Jinchuriki pouted as the Kunoichi gave him a teasing grin. "Ino-chan is so mean." The Yamanaka's long ponytail swung side to side as she playfully shook her head. "Nope, just honest." Her fellow blonde slumped over in defeat while the Kunoichi chewed on her lower lip and contemplated asking about something that'd been bothering her for a while. Naruto looked up after a few seconds and she could see he was expecting a question. Deciding they weren't close enough, Ino quickly asked something else. "Why did you come on the mission? It seemed like you were on vacation back there." Naruto's blue eyes scrutinized the Kunoichi for a moment before he answered. "Well, I thought it would be cool to catch up with you guys and was hoping Asuma-sensei would give me some tips about wind manipulation. Besides, Uro-sennin wasn't teaching me anything new and I wasn't getting any real training done on the island." Ino looked at the Uzumaki innocently. "So you go away with a notorious pervert for a while and now want to spend some time alone with me? How scandalous, what would Sakura say?" A wide grin spread across Naruto's face as the Kunoichi baited him. But she was treading into dangerous waters now. The pink hat was still a sore subject. He decided it would be best to move the conversation in a different direction and spoke in a serious tone. "Okay, since I answered your question you have to answer one of mine. Why don't you guys talk about the earlier stages of the Chunin exam?" Ino shivered automatically while remembering those 5 days in Training Area 44. Months had passed since the battle in the Forest of Death, but whenever the subject came up images of slaughtered Konoha flashed through her memory. Naruto frowned after she trembled slightly and the Chunin wished he didn't push her. "Sorry, you don't really need to answer." Ino stared at the wooden floor and slowly shook her head. "It's alright, you deserve to know what happened." During the second exam, shinobi from Ado and the other minor villages banded together to hunt down teams from Konoha and Suna. It was like a war in there. The smell of blood, mangled bodies spread everywhere. The Yamanaka trailed off and Naruto wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Hey, it's okay now. You guys kicked their asses in the finals. The girl moved closer into his embrace and said, "We paid them back good in the forest too, but not those auto bastards." Naruto rubbed Ino's back gently when she finished. "It's okay, we'll return the favor someday." Anger bubbled in the Uzumaki's stomach as he thought of the Sound Village while the faces of Kimimaro and Kabuto flashed through his memory. "It might take a while, but they'll answer for what they did, I promise." Ino looked into the boy's determined blue eye and felt a blush rising on her cheeks. She twisted out of the intimate position they were in and coughed into her hand. "It's getting late, so I'm heading to bed. Shifts for guard duty are the same tonight." The kunoichi walked down the hall and Naruto nodded as he got up and headed to his bed as well. "Might as well get some sleep before my turn babysitting." Naruto grumbled as the door to Michiru's and Hikaru's room opened before the boy walked out while rubbing his eyes. "I need to go to the bathroom." The Uzumaki pointed back to their room. "You guys have a bucket in there." "It's number 2. The blonde sighed as he watched the whining boy twist uncomfortably and stood up before creating a clone to watch the door. The shinobi took Hikaru's hand and led him through the lower deck, but when they started up the staircase he realized the ship was rocking violently. The two of them entered the mess hall and saw sailors scrambling around while the captain shouted out orders. A balding man with leathery skin and gray eyes walked up to him. "What are you doing up here, boys? There's a hell of a storm going on now. We tried securing the animals better, but none of us could do it in this weather. Couldn't even take the sail down, had to cut the damn rigging so the mast didn't break." The sailor walked away while Hikaru remembered the earlier encounter with Chamu and anger distorted his features before he snorted, "Good riddance, they're just stupid animals." The boy let out an eep when Naruto picked him up by the collar and shoved him against the wall. "You're no better than trash. Those animals are living creatures and you're treating them like plastic dolls. The only reason they're out there is because you wanted to buy them, and now you don't care if they live and die. That makes me sick." Naruto found a crew member and asked about chains to further secure the animals while Hikaru slumped to the floor. The child sat there and remembered the amazement he felt watching the performance, how great it was to forget his mother's accusations against his father, but mostly her disappointment in him. Chamu helped push the painful words away, but after Naruto scolded him they all came rushing back. The boy leaned against the wall and thought about his parents' argument. "Is that why mom called me ruined? Because I treat living things like toys." Hikaru set his jaw and stood up. He would make his mother proud. The boy sprinted up the stairs and grabbed the keys off the wall before pulling the door open, ignoring the shouts telling him to stop. He grabbed a rope that was secured to the deck before crawling towards Chamu's cage as the animal's intelligent eyes watched him struggle against the sheets of rain and wind. Hikaru's determination allowed him to focus on the rope and put one hand in front of the other until he got to the tiger's cage. The boy inserted the key and turned it until there was a clicking noise, but as soon as the lock came off the door which he was holding onto it swung open and threw him into the ocean. Naruto shielded his face and cursed before making 20 shadow clones that took the heavy chains to tie down the other animals. The shinobi rushed towards the edge of the boat, but before he got there Chamu leapt into the water. The Uzumaki looked for the two in the choppy ocean, but he didn't see them after a few moments and cursed loudly. The Chunin put his foot on the rail and was about to dive into the violent waves when the saber-tooth broke the surface with an unconscious Hikaru in his jaws before climbing up the rope ladder on the side. The shinobi let his clones finish securing the cages as he gently laid Hikaru down and performed CPR until the boy coughed up water. He picked the noble up carefully and Chamu led him downstairs into the mess hall. The trio was given a wide berth as they walked over to the wall where the rare tiger laid down and looked at the unconscious child in Naruto's arms. The Chunin sighed and placed Hikaru against the saber-tooth's furry side before channeling chakra to his hands to draw out the water soaking the tiger and prince. Might as well get some training in now. The blonde wasn't particularly adept at using his Suten affinity yet, so it was almost an hour before they were dry, and that was because he decided to use a towel after a while. Hikaru was still unconscious, although his breathing was normal, and Naruto was lying next to him using the large saber-tooth as pillow too. The rhythmic rising and falling of Chamu's chest was lulling the Chunin to sleep, but before he closed his eyes Asuma ran into the mess hall. "Where's Hikaru?" The Jounin visibly relaxed after seeing the boy and he walked over as the rest of his team rushed up the stairs. They hurried over to their sensei as he looked at the Uzumaki and asked, "What happened?" Naruto flashed Ino a smile before looking up at her sensei and ruffling Hikaru's hair affectionately. "He was just being a stupid kid." Naruto breathed a sigh of relief when the city gates slammed shut behind them. A large crowd had packed into the city port and waited for the prince's ship to arrive in silence, but as the vessel pulled in the elephants trumpeted, causing the people to roar their approval. The procession transformed into a parade, forcing the royal caravan to march at a snail's pace through the packed streets as citizens cheered and waved to the performers. It took them more than 2 hours to reach the gates, and now the shinobi started the last leg of their mission. Once Michiru reached his family's vacation home, their contract would be up, and the Uzumaki was surprised to find himself disappointed. Flashback: Naruto grumbled as he walked through the halls looking for Hikaru. Once the boy had finished breakfast, he took off again, disappearing into the bowels of the ship. The Chunin heard something clattering in the cargo hold and pushed open the door to find the young noble's legs swinging wildly in the air as he dug through one of the many wagons filled with souvenirs. Naruto shook his head as the boy tried to extricate himself from the wagon and pulled Hikaru out by his foot. The prince smiled up at him embarrassedly before saying, "Thanks for the help." The Chunin gently placed Hikaru on the ground and the boy jumped into a different wagon. The Jinchuriki let out an exasperated sigh and asked, "What are you looking for?" The noble ignored Naruto for another minute until he let out a triumphant yell, "Yes, found it." Hikaru stood up on the wagon and proudly held up a finely carved wooden bow with moons engraved down the length before notching an arrow with a suction cup on the end onto the string. "Halt, evil villain, if you move I'll be forced to end your life." The shinobi grinned as he took a step forward. "I'd like to see you try." Naruto's leg tensed as he prepared to avoid Hikaru's shot, but it proved unnecessary as the arrow fell right to the floor. "Aha!" The Chunin leapt at Hikaru and easily wrestled the bow away from him while snatching an arrow from the quiver on his back. The string was already taut when Naruto landed and he triumphantly exclaimed, "It appears the tables have turned, young hero. You have dedication, but lack the skill to bring me down." The shinobi shot the arrow and Hikaru let out a short squeak before the suction cup landed over his mouth, causing the blonde to burst out laughing. Finally, some quiet time. The noble pulled the arrow off his mouth and stared up at Naruto in awe. "Teach me to do that, please." The shinobi grinned while replying, "Sure, I'll give you some pointers on the way back to the others if you stop running away." Hikaru nodded rapidly and the Chunin carefully handed the bow back. "You should improve pretty quickly, that's pretty well made for a toy." The young prince huffed and held up his bow proudly, letting Naruto look at the skillful woodworking. "It's not a toy, my grandpa made it for me himself." The Jinchuriki grinned as he inspected the weapon closer, surprised to find that a daimyo was capable of making something like this with his bare hands. "He sounds like a pretty cool dude. You must cherish that a lot." Hikaru looked at the ground ashamedly. "Actually, I completely forgot about it until today. It's the second one he gave me because I lost the first. I just threw this one into the cart when we left too, and Jiken worked hard to make it for me. I should have cherished it." The boy looked up when Naruto put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about it, you're just a dumb kid." The blonde grinned when Hikaru looked up at him angrily, "Although, it's impressive that you already recognize that." Naruto led the prince towards the door as he continued, "Now let's get going and I'll give you some tips." Flashback: and he looked over at Hikaru and Chamu before smiling. Ever since the incident on the deck last night, the boy and Tiger were almost inseparable, and the young noble had been practicing with his bow from the saber-tooth's back all day. He could barely get the arrow to go anywhere at first and his frustration was visible, but the boy slowly improved and could hit whatever he aimed at most of the time now. The circus performers also made the mission easier. They provided another layer of bodies around the nobles so the four Chunin had a real chance to catch up. Naruto told them about the encounter with the foreign army and laughed after hearing about the frustrating missions his friends performed since they were rookie Chunin and still low on the totem pole. The Uzumaki had been enjoying Team 10's company, although it was apparent Shikamaru and Kuuji did not like the two blondes flirting. Naruto sighed while pretending to ignore the Akimichi's glare after Hikaru stuck an arrow to his Hittite and Ino giggled as he jokingly struggled to pull it off. The Uzumaki kept trying to resist her advances, but the Kunoichi was charming and Naruto didn't know how much longer he could fight his hormones. The shinobi's blue eye trailed up the Yamanaka's toned legs, making him wonder why he wanted to fight them. Civilian girls didn't have the stamina to keep up. He had to be conscious of his own strength the whole time. It still satisfied the Jinchuriki, but not like his night with Kodohan. An image of Sakura's face during their fight flitted through Naruto's memory and he managed to look away from the Yamanaka. He already hurt his teammates so much that day and didn't want to make the situation worse. The blonde looked at the four coming up in the trail and saw the royal family's vacation home in the distance, sitting on a cliff overlooking the beach. The massive structure was nearly 200 feet wide and 3 stories tall with white shingles on the concave roof. A forest of oak tree grew in front and stretched to the wall nearly 300 feet away from the cliff's edge. The procession came to a halt as Naruto shaded his blue eye from the sun to get a better view. Wow! The carriage door opened and Michiru shuffled out to see the mansion. "I know, it's rather small, however, father keeps insisting that the money could be put to better use elsewhere." Everyone except Hikaru stared at the prince incredulously. But the man remained oblivious to it all as he devoured a sandwich. When the noble finished licking his fingers, he turned to the circus ringmaster before handing him a scroll sealed with the daimyo's signet. "Unfortunately, we cannot accommodate you at the cottage right now. There is a royal ball in 2 weeks and the guests should begin arriving within the next few days. The capital is 20 miles down the road. If you show the guard this scroll, he will bring you to the royal guest house until we are ready for you." The ringmaster took the paper and stored it in his jacket before giving a curt bow. "Of course, my lord, just give us the call." Chamu appeared disappointed when the boy slid off his back. The tiger nuzzled into Hikaru's torso and got his ears scratched before licking the child's face. "I'll miss you, buddy." The saber-tooth slowly walked away as Naruto looked at the young noble curiously. "If you asked, I bet the ringmaster would have let you keep Shamu for a while." Hikaru looked at the blonde and shrugged, "But they'll probably be performing, and it wouldn't be the same without him." A grin spread across the shinobi's face as he patted the boy's back. He smiled up at Naruto as Michiru came over and lifted him onto his shoulders. "Don't worry, my son, I talked to the ringmaster earlier today and he's going to look for a female saber-tooth to breed with Chamu. When they have a cub, the circus will take it and we can keep the parents." "Thank you, Dad." The prince looked at his son in confusion and tried to remember the last time he said those words while automatically responding, "Anything for you, my child." Michiru looked back at their summer home as his stomach began to feel uneasy. The man frowned for a moment but dismissed it as a hunger pain. "Come, let's go see father and celebrate our return with a feast." Naruto watched the first gate open and was surprised after seeing an identical set do the same nearly 100 yards behind it. The blonde looked at the man-made woods after walking through the second gates and realized some patches were denser than others. "This place may be luxurious, but it's more secure than most fortresses. It's on the side of a cliff near the beach, has 2 sets of gates they would need to break through. The wall is dull enough that regular ladders don't work, but bringing large siege weapons to break it down would be impossible because of the hilly terrain. On the off chance people got through, that forest is dense enough in some areas to hide squads of soldiers, and those are just the obvious things." Naruto looked around at the armed guards on the parapet, but he wasn't looking at them. For the last 15 minutes the blonde felt like they were being watched, and if it was Getsu Shinobi they would have moved on or shown themselves by now. The feeling didn't disappear when the gates closed either. Warning bells went off in Naruto's head as he watched Michiru's servants lead the carriage over to a small stable near the wall and start unpacking while the man walked out with his son. The group started down the path and it wasn't long before they saw more servants decorating the trees, but the prince frowned. "That's odd, I don't remember any of these people working here." "Oh well, the old staff must have gotten lazy." When Michiru didn't recognize the workers, Naruto's eye narrowed as he scrutinized them. Unfortunately, he forgot about the tree in front of him and smashed into it. The Chunin grabbed his head and rolled behind the trunk while crying out in pain. "Itai, who would plant that there?" Shikamaru deadpanned as the blonde came out from behind the tree. "How did you not see it?" Naruto scowled at the Nara. "Try walking around with one eye and see how much stuff you run into." The lazy shinobi just shook his head. "Didn't you train for that at all?" The Uzumaki deflated when Shikamaru finished. "Well yeah, but I was lost in thought there." Kuuji snorted while slapping the Jinchuriki's back, causing him to stumble forward. "That must be a new experience for you." Naruto glared at the 2 Chunin as they laughed at his expense. "Now you're asking for it." The shinobi looked at their blonde teammate and pouted when he found her laughing. "Ino-chan, I have a boo-boo, will you kiss it and make it feel better?" The kunoichi blushed as Naruto dramatically limped over to her. "Geez, you idiot, who asks that question?" The Uzumaki grinned. "Ino-chan didn't say no." The girl crossed her arms under her breasts and looked away. "I didn't say yes either." "Still didn't say no." The Yamanaka gave her fellow blonde an exasperated look. "Fine, where is it?" Naruto pointed to his lips. "Right here." The kunoichi's fist slammed into the back of his head and the Uzumaki collapsed as a knot formed. "At least my other injury doesn't hurt anymore." The servants stared incredulously at the blonde teenager prone on the ground. They thought shinobi were supposed to be violent killers, not circus clowns. Asuma chuckled good-naturedly as he picked the Chunin up, but when Naruto glanced at him they shared a quick look before the Jounin pulled out a cigarette. "Alright, we're almost there, so let's hurry up and drop these 2 off." The rest of the trip was made in silence and they walked into the entrance hall a few minutes later. Michiru sniffed the air and grinned. "Oh, father has a meal prepared for us." The man waddled excitedly through the corridors and the others followed him to the dining room, but when they arrived the prince appeared shocked as he stared at the person sitting in the daimyo's chair. "Shabba dabba. Where is father? Did something happen?" Michiru barely paid attention to the succulent ribs the powerful noble was enjoying. Concern overrode the prince's hunger. His old friend took a few moments to clean the meat off the bone and let out a satisfied burp before responding, "I'm sorry Michiru, but it is my sad duty to inform you the daimyo has been arrested for treason yesterday. He is being charged with the assassination of 2 nobles that opposed his policies last year." "No, it can't be." The prince's body went limp and he fell to his knees while repeating the charges over and over in his head. The pudgy man shook his head in denial and clenched his fists. "Father would never do something like that, he's not that kind of man." Shabadaba raised his right fist and soldiers emerged from hidden side doors in the room and grabbed the royal family. "I cannot speak on that as it is for the courts to decide, however, you have been implicated as an accomplice and shall be joining him until the trial. We will take Hikaru and place him in protective custody." The mustachioed noble turned towards the shinobi who were poised to explode into motion. "Konohanin, thank you for performing your duty, but the mission contract is up and this is an internal affair of Tsuki no Kuni." Asuma bowed stiffly while trying to ignore the betrayed faces of Michiru and Hikaru. "Of course, we shall take our leave." The shinobi slowly backed out of the room before exiting the house. They quietly walked through the man-made forest and out of the gates before sprinting towards the capital city. After traveling a few miles, Asuma called for a halt. "I've been around long enough to recognize a coup. It's impossible to publicly charge a daimyo with a crime that would lead to complete anarchy. They are barred from the public and confined in another noble's house while a secret panel quietly investigates the matter." The Jounin stopped for a moment and looked around before the wind picked up. They hand the evidence over to another panel of nobles that reviews it again and both of their reports are handed to a jury for the final decision. If the nobles had secretly charged the daimyo, then his heirs wouldn't have been welcomed back. They would have been told to stay away until the investigation's conclusion. When the Jounin finished, 5 Naruto clones landed next to them with Michiru and Hikaru in tow, and the other shinobi stared at the blonde in surprise while he grinned triumphantly. "I was feeling uneasy as we got closer, and when the prince realized there were different servants I knew something happened. He doesn't seem like the type to remember who his servants are, and if he recognized them that means they worked there for a while. I doubt all of them would have been fired at the same time, especially because you need to trust people that work close to the daimyo." The Jinchuriki grinned as the others heaped praise onto him, but Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. "Did you make a fool of yourself to create a distraction for the substitution, Naruto? How much is an act and how much is really you?" The Nara smiled as he walked up to the blonde and patted him on the back. "I guess we shouldn't underestimate you anymore. When you get back to Konoha we should play a game of shogi." The blonde nodded distractedly as he looked back towards the mansion. "Sure, but right now we have to focus on Shabadaba. My clones weren't discovered and got put in a cell with the daimyo. He's barely alive and they turned his legs to stone, so we need to move now." Michiru's face went pale as the shinobi finished. "What? You have to do something. Papa can't die." Shikamaru looked at the man reassuringly. "Don't worry, I have a plan." Isaribi's eyes widened as she watched the clones land next to the Konoha shinobi with Michiru and his son. The girl slipped behind the crest of the hill and whispered, "No," over and over again while the other 2 Autonin looked at her strangely. Suigetsu slid down next to Isaribi and lightly grabbed her wrist. "Hey, what's wrong?" The former Kirinin could feel the girl trembling as she looked over at him. "Now they're coming back, he'll see me and remember." The 2 shinobi shared puzzled looks before Suigetsu got the shaken girl's attention again. "To the Jounin." Isaribi shook her head as visions of the blonde effortlessly swatting her aside flashed through her mind. His icy gaze haunted her more than any of the villagers ever did. The girl shivered while remembering the emotions in his expressive blue eye: empathy, disappointment, pity, sorrow, but most of all anger. That haunting gaze promised death, and when Isaribi saw it she knew her life was in immediate danger. The blonde one. Sakon's eyes shone with interest as he focused his telescope on the shinobi. Did he have whisker marks and one blue eye? Isaribi looked up at him in surprise. "Yes, how do you know?" The effeminate shinobi joined his teammates on the slope and put his telescope away. "Because he fought Kimimaro, and anyone that survives a fight with him is a person I want to stay away from. Fortunately it won't come to that. There can be no proof of Otto's involvement. They can't know we're here. If Shabadaba's plan fails we need to kill anybody who knows about Otto's involvement and slip out unnoticed. Tsuki and Tano Kuni are allies, we can't have any involvement in overthrowing their government. Konoha is just waiting for an excuse to knock our doors." Isaribi looked relieved when Sakon finished, but she still couldn't think clearly. "Then what should we do? Those shinobi definitely won't be able to stop them." Suigetsu pulled out his telescope while answering. "Didn't Orochimaru give you a summoning scroll for a messenger snake?" The girl nodded and he continued while moving back up the hill. "Good, we'll move away and use the snake to explain the situation to him." I recognize the Jounin from looking in old bingo books as a kid, that's Sarutobi Asuma and he's more of a threat than the idiot blonde. The former Kirinin looked at the whiskered shinobi through his telescope. If he could upset one of Orochimaru's favorite boy toys then the freak would definitely be interested in him. I wonder what he'll do. Orochimaru looked over a map displaying the situation in Kuni. Its citizens were beginning to starve and the daimyo recently sent in a request for aid to Otogakure. Guren had been able to muster enough squads of bandits and missing nin to terrorize the countryside, along with some help from sound shinobi of course. Several of the major cities were completely cut off from surrounding towns because his troops stocked the roads, and tourism plummeted. If this kept up Guren might be in Shimo within a year. The man looked at a table covered by reports detailing the situation in Tano-kuni and grinned wickedly. All the pieces were moving as he predicted, and soon the fruits of his exploitation could be harvested. A puff of smoke broke the traitorous member of the Sannin from his thoughts and he looked at the messenger snake curiously. What news do you bring? The summon regurgitated a scroll with Isaribi seal and the man broke it before scanning the contents. Orochimaru's predatory yellow eyes gleamed with interest after reading it and he walked through the main base while the snake followed him. He entered a room filled with dozens of empty coffins and labeled jars filled with small pieces of flesh and bone floating in transparent green ooze. Orochimaru approached the shelf labeled Cloud and extracted some of the goo inside 2 jars with eyedroppers before sealing a pair of coffins into different scrolls. The snake summoner then grabbed 2 empty inkwells and blank scrolls. He dripped the green liquid into the wells and mixed some Fuuinjutsu ink into both of them for several minutes before inspecting the consistency. Orochimaru repeated the process until he was satisfied with the results and proceeded to draw 2 complex seals that were nearly identical, except for different kanji in the center. When the ink was dry the legendary shinobi rolled the scrolls up and placed all 4 next to each other before smirking. This should be an excellent test of your growth Naruto-kun, let's see exactly how much you've progressed. He attached 2 kunai covered with strange seals to the designated scrolls and looked at the small messenger snake before saying, you know what to do. The summon swallowed his master before the 4 scrolls and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Shabadaba roared as he threw the porcelain dish containing his beef stew into the wall. What do you mean those are clones in the cell? Suigetsu sighed as the noble turned red while breathing heavily. The Konoha shinobi duped you. Something probably tipped them off and they performed a kawamiri before entering the house. Damn it, of all the time for incompetence. Ishidate, Karenbana, Kongo, retrieve the fat prince and his whiny brat. The former Kirinin snorted when Shabadaba gave the order, your shinobi are outnumbered 5-3 and we can't be seen supporting a coup against the daimyo. There's no way they'll succeed. When Suigetsu finished the fuming noble sat down and stared irritably at him before responding sarcastically, and what would you suggest I do? Wait for them to come and surrender to me? Of course not, the white-haired shinobi grinned, revealing his shark-like teeth, as Isaribi put 4 scrolls on the table. Our master sent this to assist your ninja. There are 2 coffins sealed in the scroll, you must place 2 humans in there and swipe your blood over the seals on the other 2 scrolls to complete the ritual. 2 undead shinobi of great strength will be summoned. Once you place the talisman into them they will pursue their objective relentlessly and disappear when it is complete. Shabadaba smiled wickedly as he looked at the present Orochimaru granted him, your master is most generous. Shikamaru pulled on the ridiculous blue and pink polka dot bodysuit he wore as a disguise while watching the animal trainers in the circus maneuver their dangerous animals as if they shared a brain. The lazy genius sighed and adjusted an oversized red afro wig and red clown nose that completed the outfit, trying to convince himself everything would work out. Naruto's clones hadn't been discovered and Shabadaba had no reason to suspect they would be returning. There was no way the ambitious noble would even think the circus was a clever distraction to get them in, especially with the upcoming ball. As they neared the outer wall Shikamaru pushed all the other thoughts aside and watched the ringmaster approach the gates. Hello, is anyone there? We're the circus hired to perform before the ball. A man wearing full armor appeared on the wall and scanned the circus. You're 2 weeks early, go seek shelter somewhere else. The ringmaster's face fell when the guard finished. Oh, I am positive we were supposed to arrive today, it was in the instructions I received. The man held up a scroll and the sentry nodded, let me check that. The ringmaster threw it up to him, and the man broke the seal before reading it over. It looks official. We'll let you in, but you'll have to wait at the stables until our master is ready to see you and figure everything out. The circus walked in through the outer gate when it opened, yet the inner one never did, and once there was no more room between them the sentry called out, fire. Archers popped up on the parapets and launched arrows into the tightly packed crowd on both sides of the wall, but when the people were hit they disappeared in puffs of smoke that clouded the soldiers' vision. The archers readied another volley, but dozens of Cage Bunshine jumped on the wall and engaged the enemy troops. One clone found the lever controlling the gates and opened the inside one before the remaining circus performers transformed into Naruto clones and rushed into the forest. Dozens of bandits ran out of the house as a loud bell echoed around the property, but shortly after entering the men made Wood's kunai and shuriken cut them down from all angles. After the first 40 died, the others retreated and waited hesitantly outside the trees while eyeing the shadows warily, and when they changed shapes and started moving, the bandits ran back towards the mansion. Some made it inside, but most froze before reaching the doors, and loud voice echoed from the trees, "Baika no Jutsu." A large green ball rolled out of the woods and crushed the thugs milliseconds after they regained control of their body. Naruto ran out of the woods with Team 10, but as they approached the mansion, its front door swung open and Shabadaba stepped out with 3 shinobi flanking him. The Uzumaki growled as he stared coolly at the short noble. "Release the daimyo and his family." The pudgy man gave them a smug grin. "Why ask for his family when you already have them? Now, hand them over and you can walk away from here peacefully." Asuma pulled out his trench knives while staring at the 3 wondering ninja. "You should learn how to count. You're in no position to demand everything. Surrender now and maybe the daimyo will let you live after." Shabadaba laughed hysterically before regaining his composure and staring at the Konohinin pompously. "Of course I can count, Jounin-san. But you forget, this is my trap. Now, I'll give you one more chance." The noble received no answer and nodded while unrolling 2 scrolls. "So be it." The shinobi surrounding him forced the Konohinin to jump away with a barrage of kunai, and 2 servants appeared next to Shabadaba with sliced hands and rubbed the blood over the seals. They began glowing as 2 coffins rose up behind him with the kanji for gold on the left and silver on the right. The covers shattered as 2 shinobi stepped out with tan skin that appeared flaky and green eyes inside of a black iris. They both had purple kumo hitaites around their forehead, bull-like horns sticking 3 feet out of their hair, which was styled like a traditional kabuki actor, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek, causing Naruto's blue eye to shoot open. The 2 kumo nin wore the white jounin vest over purple sleeveless and black pants that matched their metal wrist guards. There were only a few differences between the 2. The one on the left was taller, had blonde hair, and the kanji for gold tattooed on his left shoulder, while the one on the right had gray hair and the kanji for silver on his right shoulder. The revived kumo jounin looked the 5 Konohinin as Naruto swore, "Shit, this is Edo Tensei." Asuma gave the blonde a surprised look. "How do you know about that?" "Kabuto used it against me and Uro-sennin when we found Tsunade Bakken. He resurrected her old lover Dan and little brother Nawaki." The former guardian shifted his gaze back to the king and Kyodai as 2 of the living shinobi placed talismans into their neck. "Well, this time it's much worse. Those are the Gold and Silver Brothers, S-ranked criminals during the era of village formation. The 2 of them infiltrated peace talks between Kumo and Konoha and left the Nidaime in a near-death state." When Asuma finished, the 2 resurrected shinobi began to change and took on a more lifelike appearance, except for their eyes, which remained hauntingly empty. The undead kumo nin stretched for a moment before breaking their silence. "Well, brother, it looks like people still remember us. What an honor." The silver-haired one smiled when the sibling finished. "Indeed, Kinkaku, although it is disappointing to see that Konoha still exists." The revived blonde nodded. "I agree, but if it was gone we wouldn't have the opportunity to kill a few more leaf shinobi." He looked at the blonde chunin with markings similar to theirs. "This is interesting, Genkaku. Why would a Konoha nin have whiskers on his cheek like us?" The shorter man shrugged. "That is a good question, brother. I doubt our descendants would ever stoop far enough to join the Hidden Leaf, so I'm guessing it has something to do with the Kyuubi." Naruto's blue eye narrowed at the men. "Bingo, so did he eat you too?" What, the fox swallowed you? Is that how you guys died?" Kenkaku laughed at the confused blonde. "Of course not, we caused enough ruckus in his stomach that he threw us up. We managed to take a few pounds of flesh with us too." Asuma cursed as he looked at the reanimated shinobi. They were brought back in the prime of their lives with all the knowledge and techniques they gained in their later years. The man doubted he could win against one of them, and 2 was unthinkable. Maybe they should have taken Shabadaba's deal. They survived by eating the Kyuubi's flesh, and were able to utilize its chakra like a Jinchuriki after he vomited them out. Asuma looked at the pudgy noble standing in the doorway. "So when would you like the prince and his son by?" He felt bad turning the 2 nobles over, and the disappointed looks his students gave him didn't make it any easier. But one day the chunin would understand. If they survived. Shabadaba seemed to be giving his offer genuine thought, but before he could speak, Kinkaku burst forward and delivered a brutal strike to Naruto, which sent him flying into the trees. Ino called out his name as he disappeared into the forest, and the king and Kyodai gave chase. Asuma cursed and pivoted. "You guys stay here and handle these 3, I'll try to help Naruto." The Jounin disappeared from the spot he was standing in and his students faced the wandering shinobi. Shabadaba smirked as he turned around. Ishidate, Karanbana, Kongo, take care of them. The doors closed behind the noble and Kongo rushed forward while pulling the halberd off his back. He swung it towards the Chunin while unleashing a vicious roar, but Kuji grabbed the handle and tried to rip the weapon away. The two behemoths struggled for dominance until Kongo headbutted the younger shinobi and kicked him away from his teammates before following. Shikamaru cursed as the woman forced him and Dino to separate with a barrage of kunai and turned around to block a punch from the red-haired one, but he wasn't quick enough to stop the left hook that smashed into his cheek. The Nara winced in pain and spit out the blood pooling in his mouth while eyeing his opponent. The man stared at him cockily while lifting his gloved hand. Such a shame. I was hoping to test myself against Sarutobi Asuma, but that won't be happening now. Ishidate flicked his long red hair aside nonchalantly while continuing, don't worry boy, I'll make it quick. Shikamaru formed the rat sign, I'm more of a slow and laid-back guy, quick is troublesome. His shadow shot towards Ishidate, but the man nimbly avoided it while an eye opened on the back of his gauntlet. Shards of rock floated up from the earth and shot towards the Nara, forcing him to leap aside and end the jutsu. Shikamaru watched the wandering nin close the gap and formed the ram sign as he got close. Ishidate put on a burst of speed and grabbed the boy, but he turned into a log. The red-haired man cursed and threw the log away as it turned to stone before ducking as 3 kunai flew over his head, but his eyes widened after seeing the sizzling tags tied to the handle. He leapt away as the explosion went off, but didn't clear the blast radius. The older shinobi tumbled out of the flames with smoke wafting off his body and came to a stop nearly 20 feet later. He knew more kunai were coming and jumped away from the area, but as he was about to land saw the boy's shadow snaking towards him. Ishidate cursed and substituted with a chunk of the petrified log before following the shadow back towards Shikamaru, who was standing on the limb of a tree. The man growled in anger, he was an elite shinobi and this kid was making a fool out of him. The shadow user smirked when Ishidate rushed towards him and dropped from the branch as flash tags went off. The red-headed ninja cursed loudly and rubbed his eyes until his vision was clear before looking around the abandoned clearing while gritting his teeth. It was time to put the battle back on his terms. Hide if you want, now I can back up my team. I wonder if your friends will be able to avoid my gauntlet. It'll almost be too easy, the fat one will be first. I'll sneak up and grab his head before crushing it. Shikamaru stepped out from behind a tree and stared at Ishidate with frosty brown eyes. So that's how to rile you up, eh? Threaten your friends. The man grinned as the shadow user took a basic taijutsu stance. I won't give the blonde girl the pleasure of a quick death. She may cry at first, but when it's over she'll be screaming in a different type of pleasure. If the little cunt serves me well I may let her live a little longer. The Nara ran forward and Ishidate smirked at his lack of top-end speed. The teenager was quick, but only in short bursts. The man easily avoided Shikamaru's sloppy punch by leaning right and rolled under the Chunin's kick aimed towards his neck. The shadow user turned and jabbed towards the red-haired shinobi's nose, but he wasted too much motion and Ishidate grabbed his wrist. Shikamaru coughed up blood when the man's fist repeatedly slammed into his stomach and nearly blacked out when he got thrown into a tree. The Nara slid off the trunk to avoid a punch that splintered the wood and tried to take out his opponent's feet, but Ishidate jumped over the Chunin's leg sweep and kicked him in the face. The shadow user rolled across the ground and wobbly pushed himself up while the man smirked arrogantly, you're pathetic. All you have to rely on is stupid shadow tricks. Once it becomes a real battle your weakness is exposed. Ishidate laughed cruelly while his opponent tried to run towards him. The Nara appeared drunk and only stumbled 20 feet before collapsing again. The red-haired shinobi walked towards the boy haughtily and raised his gauntlet. It's like fighting a baby, the complete lack of a challenge takes the thrill away. Ishidate grabbed the Konohanin's throat and smirked triumphantly, but Shikamaru turned into a kunai. The red-haired shinobi growled and threw the stone kunai away while pivoting, but halfway through the spin his body froze for a moment before his neck moved on its own. The man saw Shikamaru right behind him, standing next to 2 of the 3 kunai he threw earlier in the fight, and growled while the Chunin spoke, not my usual style but it got the job done. The bloody shinobi smirked when he finished and changed the hand seal before hands made of shadow started creeping up his opponent's body. I know I'm not the toughest guy but you don't hit that hard, no matter what you think. Ishidate tried to growl but the shadow hands clamped around his neck and it came out a gasp. You overestimate yourself so much that it was easy to make you think I had been beaten. The shadowy hands tightened their grip as the wandering nin desperately tried to breathe, but he couldn't get any air through the crushed airway. Usually the jutsu ends by breaking the person's neck, but you don't get the pleasure of a quick death, and you won't be able to scream at all. Kuuji rolled to his feet and slid across the ground as the wandering nin ran towards him wielding that massive halberd. The Akimichi hopped backwards as Kongo swung his oversized weapon horizontally and used the Bubun Baiken no Jutsu to enlarge his right fist. He swung it towards the unaffiliated shinobi after the dangerous blade passed in front of him, but the hulking man blocked it with the steel shaft of his halberd. Kuuji's fist returned to its normal size as the wandering nin raised the oversized weapon over his head and swung it down. The Konoha nin managed to stop the attack by catching the shaft with his hands, but he was left open and Kongo delivered another punishing kick to his side that sent him crashing into the tree, leaving a large dent in the trunk. The air was knocked from the Akimichi's lungs, but he still managed to roll away before the horizontal slash nearly cut him in two like the tree he was just leaning against. Kuuji stared at his opponent and eyed the halberd cautiously. He had to neutralize the dangerous weapon before worrying about anything else, but that left an opening his opponent kept taking advantage of. The Akimichi would have to get rid of the weapon first, but until then he needed to dodge, something that didn't come naturally to him. The Konoha nin threw some kunai towards Kongo as he charged, but the man effortlessly deflected them with a swing from his halberd and didn't lose any momentum. Kuuji hopped right to avoid a vertical slash that left a deep gouge in the earth, which allowed the wandering nin push some of the dirt towards his opponent with his halberd. The Konoha nin protected his eyes with his arm and hopped left to avoid the spear tip at the end of the oversized weapon. The Akimichi pushed the axe head wide and delivered a solid blow to his opponent's face, but the large man wasn't fazed and swung the halberd back towards him. Kuuji jumped over the horizontal slash and jabbed towards the unaffiliated shinobi as his fist enlarged. Kongo smashed into the ground and let out a grunt as the teenager pulled his arm back and prepared another strike, but the man angled his halberd so the tip was pointed towards the Akimichi's fist. The Konoha nin diverted the attack before using his hand to push away from the large shinobi that pushed himself up with the oversized weapon. The wandering nin charged towards the chunin after he regained his feet, but Kuuji rushed to meet him. When the younger shinobi saw his opponent move the halberd to the left, he hopped backwards and avoided the horizontal swing. The Akimichi landed before Kongo could recover from the attack and smashed his enlarged fist into the man's kidneys, sending him rolling across the ground. A confident grin spread across Kuuji's face as he let the wandering nin stand up and grab the halberd. The weapon was dangerous because of its size and weight, but those traits also created glaring weaknesses that were exploitable. The two large shinobi had plenty of room to maneuver so the Akimichi could keep his opponent at a safe range, but if Kongo did get close enough to launch an attack it would still be telegraphed. The halberd's weight also increased the time it took to recover from the swings. Still, it didn't appear the older ninja realized that because he rushed forward while bellowing an angry war cry. The man performed an overhead strike that Kuuji easily avoided by jumping to his right before launching a jab towards Kongo's face. The chunin was surprised when the older shinobi let go of the weapon with one hand to block the punch while lifting his weapon off the ground, but Kuuji was able to step on the shaft and stop the halberd while delivering a powerful jab with his left fist to the wandering nin's throat. Kongo let go of the Akimichi's other hand and the Konoha nin delivered a right hook to his opponent's chin. The large man stumbled backwards while awkwardly swinging his weapon, which forced Kuuji to leap away because he had to respect the deadly weapon. Kongo regained his balance before taking a deep breath and rushing forward. He let out a roar while thrusting the spear's point towards the teenager, but Kuuji hopped out of range. The large shinobi wasn't deterred and took a step forward while swinging the 18-inch spike towards his opponent's head. The Konoha nin grabbed the weapon under the axe as it flew towards him and rolled under the strike while twisting his arm. The momentum behind Kongo's attack combined with the awkward wrenching motion allowed Kuuji to pull the halberd away. The wandering nin got in a defensive position as the Akimichi rushed forward and lifted the weapon over his head, which made the man smile. The teenager's inexperience with the halberd showed. He started the attack too close and would be open to a counter. Kongo prepared to deliver a devastating right hook to the Konoha nin's jaw, but the chunin was feinting. He dropped the weapon halfway through and blocked Kongo's attack with his left knee while his right arm increased in size. Kuuji's enlarged fist smashed into the unaffiliated shinobi and he skipped across the ground while the Akimichi picked up the halberd and spun around before throwing it towards the dazed man. The wind was knocked out of Kongo as he smashed into a tree and watched his weapon rapidly spin as it flew towards his head. The shinobi pushed himself off the trunk, but the halberd cut off the upper right half of his torso and he gasped in pain while blood spurted from the wound. The chunin walked forward and ignored Kongo's exposed lung and chest cavity while he futilely tried to draw a breath. Kuuji grabbed the halberd's handle and pulled it free with a grunt before pivoting and swinging it towards the wounded man's throat. The soft flesh of Kongo's neck provided little resistance to the blade and the Akimichi solemnly cleaned the blood off. Ino scanned the area for the wandering nin as hundreds rose petals twisted in the air around her. She saw the blue-haired woman approaching from the front and raised her Tosen in defense, but the attack came from her left and the blonde had a shallow cut going up her side. Genjutsu, Ino cut the flow of her chakra and waited for the next attack. She saw Karenbana approach from her right and pivoted to meet the woman, but the blonde felt a kunai slash up her back. The Chunin cursed as she held her fans in front of her defensively. "You're going to wish you killed me with those last attacks." The Yamanaka waited for Karenbana to attack again while trying to figure out what she was doing. When Ino heard the wandering nin behind her, she hopped to the left and didn't get hit. Karenbana smirked as she pivoted and charged towards the Chunin who rushed to meet the attack, but Ino had no intention of meeting her opponent head-on before figuring out the woman's strategy and jumped right before getting close. The Konoha Kunoichi narrowed her eyes as she felt the air shift next to her neck when Karenbana's kunai just missed her. "What's going on? That attack was far enough away that I shouldn't have felt anything. Are my reactions off?" The Chunin's sky-blue eyes shot open and she pulled a small syringe from her pack before injecting it into her thigh. A few seconds later she saw Karenbana approach from her left and turn to meet her, but as she did the blue-haired Kunoichi shifted to the right while grinning cockily. Ino pretended not to see the move, and when the wandering nin got close the Chunin twisted her Tosen to block the kunai before delivering a kick to her opponent's side that pushed Karenbana back. The blonde put one of her Tosen away and uncoiled the whip around her torso before channeling elemental chakra through the weapons. "So you're a poison user?" Karenbana growled as the Konoha nin's whip and Tosen glowed red and wondered why the technique started failing recently. Her concoctions didn't affect the auto shinobi and now this teenager figured it out. "How did you know?" The Yamanaka smirked while responding, "Unfortunately for you, one of my friends is much better at using poisons, and I always have a few antidotes on hand to counter her." When Ino finished, the older Kunoichi disappeared into the swirling petals. "It doesn't matter, you and your friends shall die here today." The Chunin turned and snapped her whip as Karenbana approached from her back, sending a small blast of fire towards the woman. She was forced to dodge the Konoha and lunged towards her while swinging the glowing Tosen in her right hand. The wandering shinobi parried and growled when her kunai started to melt, so she hopped away while pulling out a brace of shuriken. Karenbana threw them towards the blonde, but the teenager easily deflected them with her steel fan and ran forward. The older Kunoichi smirked as she got close and moved to block the glowing fan, but Ino shifted it and stabbed it through her chest. The woman looked shocked until she dissolved into rose petals that swirled around the Konoha nin. Ino cursed as she looked around, but her opponent never appeared. Instead, the petals started leaving cuts on her body. The blonde stopped her chakra flow and saw the shuriken flying through the twister and nimbly avoided them, but she wasn't able to locate the wandering nin. It was difficult to detect the shuriken's trajectory through the petals to locate their source. The Yamanaka searched for the woman while dodging throwing stars, but it was nearly impossible and new cuts were appearing all over her body. The blonde Kunoichi began running towards the edge of the twister, but the rose petals followed her wherever she went. Ino's legs beginning to tire from the constant dodging and it was getting harder to think. She took a deep breath and quickly shot a different antidote into her leg. Seconds later the Konoha nin felt her muscles loosen, was able to think clearly and began throwing her own shuriken to deflect some of those flying at her. "Okay Ino, just clear your head and think this through, she's somewhere around here." The blonde took a deep breath through her nose and fought to keep any expression from her face after recognizing a familiar fragrance. The Yamanaka began moving around the area while trying to pinpoint the location, and once she was sure made a triangle with her two hands while saying, "Shinrenshin no Jutsu, mind-body disturbance technique." The rose petals twisting around the blonde floated to the earth as Karenbana appeared underneath a tree. The wandering ninja scowled as she tried to move her body. "How did you know where I was?" Ino grinned. "You wear so much perfume it overpowered the rose's smell and made your Meisaigaku useless." The blue-haired woman growled while looking at the smug teenager. "What are you so happy about? The way I see it, you have to hold that seal for me to stay frozen or you would have let it go already." The Yamanaka shrugged. "You're right, I could hold this long enough for one of my teammates to get you, but why do that when I could do this, Shinran Bu no Jutsu, mind-body destruction dance? What are you doing to me?" Karenbana tried to stop her arm from reaching her pouch. She knew what was going to happen next, but for all the woman's effort her limb didn't even slow down. It grabbed a kunai before holding it up to her neck, and the wandering nin closed her eyes while begging, "Please, have mercy." The only answer she received was the kunai sliding across her throat. Orochimaru watched from the canopy of a tree as Naruto recovered in midair and revealed his sharingan before landing on the ground. Impressive recovery after such a hard strike. "Now, show me what you're capable of with Sasuke-kun's eye." The Chunin slid across the ground as Ginkaku ran towards him, but the sharingan wasn't enough to keep up and the reanimated shinobi delivered a knee to the boy's stomach. "Nice move, Naruto-kun." The Uzumaki disappeared into a puff of smoke and jumped towards the silver-haired Kumonin's back from a nearby tree with his saber ready. Ginkaku turned and easily blocked the blade with his metal wrist guards as seals glowed on them, but before he could counter, two more blondes emerged from the dirt behind him with Rasengan in their hands. The man ducked and let the saber-wielding Chunin fly past him while spinning and kicking the first Bunshine into the other one, dispelling them both. Then the Kumonin planted his feet and delivered a brutal jab to the remaining blonde, however he dispelled in a puff of smoke like the other two. Ginkaku looked around angrily as Orochimaru chuckled from his perch and watched the real Naruto create a single clone before dispelling. The Serpentine Man wondered what its purpose was while informing Ginkaku of the Chunin's position as he created 20 more clones. They quickly spread out in the trees around the revived shinobi before attacking from all angles. The revived man's body crackled with lightning while he flashed through seals and called out, "Raiten, John, false darkness." Large streams of electricity arced off his body and destroyed the clones before the Kumonin made another hand seal and dozens of lightning bolts shot towards Naruto's location. The Konohanin jumped away from the jutsu and landed stared across from his grinning opponent before the undead shinobi vanished. The Chunin tried to perform a substitution, but he wasn't fast enough and Ginkaku's fist smashed into his cheek. He rolled nearly 50 feet across the ground before coming to a stop and pushed himself up. The blonde stared warily at the revived shinobi as Asuma landed next to him. The Sarutobi he looked down at the Chunin and grunted, "We need to draw these guys away. That's a B-rank jutsu and it completely ripped the land up, and if they start throwing around stronger ones my team may get caught in the crossfire." Naruto nodded as he made a clone that dispelled instantly. "Okay, if these guys were ordered to kill us maybe we can drag them away. Let's try slowly moving towards the wall and see if they follow." Asuma stared at the two Kumonin while responding, "Okay, but we can't possibly win this battle. We need to counter the Edo Tensei." The blonde looked over at the mansion quickly. "The only way to stop them is for the user to cancel the jutsu. I'll send a clone to tell Shikamaru that when we get a chance." When the two Konohanin finished planning, Orochimaru commanded the revived shinobi to attack. The snake summoner could feel their displeasure at not being allowed to use the Rikudo Senin no Hagu in the assault, but he wanted to test Naruto, not watch him get sealed into that damnable crimson gourd. Ginkaku seemed to disappear and Asuma turned around to block the kick going towards their backs, but Naruto wasn't able to keep up with the other revived shinobi and was sent tumbling towards the wall. The Konoha disengaged and jumped back to the Chunin while thinking, "That's one way to move the fight." The Sarutobi realized the dead Kumonin were sprinting after them and picked up the dazed blonde before leaping over the wall. Asuma was moving so fast he didn't see two Naruto clones abduct the largest bandits still fighting near the forest. The Jounin ran nearly half a mile before dropping the Jinchuriki and facing down the gold and silver brothers. The Chunin fumed while staring up at Asuma. "Oi, you didn't need to do that. I knew what was happening. Spend less time worrying about me or you might get killed." The Sarutobi pushed the teenager's rant aside and wondered if he acted like that at 14. These two left the Nidaime Hokage on death's door. Granted, neither of them could have done that individually, but that still put the revived shinobi on a level well above theirs. It was a possibility he was underestimating the Chunin, but there was no way he could compete in a fight like this without using the Kyuubi. "Listen Naruto, I know you've been around some high-level fights in your career, but have you ever actually fought an S-class shinobi?" The Jinchuriki frowned as he recalled the mission to Takigakour, the way Kakashi completely folded to avoid fighting that strange man. Ninja-like that were coming after him and now was the perfect time to test his capabilities. "No, but that's what I've been training for. We can't retreat, these guys will follow us to the ends of the earth and might turn back for Ino, Kuji, and Shikamaru at any time. This has to end here one way or the other, and if things to turn ugly I can always use the fox." Asuma shook his head. "Unless you can control a high amount that might do more harm than good, these guys are able to use the Kyuubi's chakra like Jinchuriki. That's how they took on the Nidaime." Orochimaru felt the revived shinobi's desire to fight through their link and ordered them to wait. He wanted to see what the blonde had planned. Naruto unsheathed his saber and smirked, "Who said anything about me transforming?" Asuma was shocked when the Chunin turned towards him with the blade pulled back, but two Kage Bunshine landed in between them holding a muscular man nearly 7 feet tall with a shaved head. The blonde left a small scratch on the bandit's side that glowed orange with the Kyuubi's chakra. As the unfortunate man screamed in pain, Asuma looked at the king and Kyodai and wondered why they weren't attacking. If their main purpose was to kill them, the two should have been attacking relentlessly, but instead the Kumonin had given him and Naruto plenty of time to prepare and recover. The Edo Tensei was a jutsu exclusive to Konoha, and only the Hokage was supposed to know how to perform it. But it appeared Orochimaru did too, and Asuma doubted the secretive man shared that information with anybody. He briefly wondered what Oto would gain by overthrowing Tsuki's daimyo, but that was something that could be worked out if they survived the fight. The Jounin could clearly see Kinkaku and Ginkaku wanted to keep attacking, and the only reason they weren't was the person controlling them. Asuma doubted that was Shabadaba, meaning Orochimaru was watching the fight, which only made everything worse. The traitorous Konoha shinobi chuckled while Asuma looked around nervously, but it didn't break his focus on the bandit's transformation. "What a marvelous technique, Naruto-kun. Your growth has truly been remarkable." The Serpentine ninja smirked as he watched a black sphere envelop the imposing man. "It seems you might be able to help weaken my former comrades in Akatsuki, which is one less thing for me to worry about." The shinobi's predatory eyes gleamed with interest as the sphere faded, revealing a hulking figure cloaked in red and black chakra with blank white eyes and long thin ears. Chakra tails began growing from the creature's spine until four swung eagerly behind him. Asuma was in shock as he took in the pseudo Jinchuriki, and his mouth dropped after a putrid killing intent blanketed the area. He turned towards Naruto while gathering himself and asked, "What is going on?" The Chunin shrugged, "It's something that happened when my sword changed. I can funnel the Kyuubi's chakra into a person and it transforms them into something like that. Generally it lasts 20 to 30 minutes, but I've never gone above 3. My clones grabbed the strongest guy still alive, but we should only count on 10 minutes with 4 tails." The possessed bandit ran towards the king and Kyodai as Ginkaku launched a concentrated John at it. The lightning blast couldn't pierce the creature's dense chakra cloak and only slowed him down. He growled while launching a chakra claw towards the two revived shinobi that forced them to separate before running towards the silver-haired one. Ginkaku felt no pain when the pseudo Jinchuriki bit off his left forearm and coated his remaining fist in lighting before delivering a powerful jab that made the creature stagger backwards. The dead ninja leapt away while his arm reformed and flashed through a different series of hand seals after landing while the beast lunged towards him. Raiten, Raikyu, the Kumonin launched a 16-foot-wide lightning ball that hit the transformed bandit and sent him flying, but still didn't pierce his chakra cloak. The beast let out a roar and exploded towards the silver-haired shinobi as he prepared another Raikyu. But as Ginkaku launched his jutsu, the pseudo Jinchuriki blurred away and appeared 15 feet on the revived man's left. The transformed bandit extended his chakra claws and clapped them together to crush the resurrected man, but he vanished before delivering another lightning-enhanced punch that staggered the beast. Ginkaku put some distance between them once more and grinned when the pseudo Jinchuriki regained his balance and roared before beginning another futile assault. 4 tails wouldn't make the revived shinobi sweat. Naruto created a horde of clones that rushed towards Ginkaku. Some jumped into the air and they surrounded him on all sides before half-transformed into Fuuma Shuriken. The remaining Cage Bunshine tossed them towards the Kumonin, and when the weapons got close they turned back into clones holding Rasengan in their hands. Shiho Happo Rasengan. Reigeki no Yoroi. Kinkaku's body was coated by lightning momentarily before he performed hand seal and it exploded off of him, dispelling all the Bunshine into puffs of smoke. The revived shinobi tried to see through the thick clouds for a moment before kunai with explosive notes wrapped around their handles landed all around him. Scorches covered his body when he emerged from the smoke and saw 20 more Cage Bunshine on the ground holding 2 swirling orbs of wind in their palms. Futon, Satadungan. Arrows of wind rushed towards the Kumonin and sliced his body apart, but as the shreds floated to the earth they reformed and the revived shinobi stood in front of them unscratched moments later. Kinkaku casually rolled his neck around a few times before staring at the Konohanin with his dead eyes. "Not bad, brat. Maybe now I can finally let loose like my brother is." The man smirked when his chakra flared a few moments later and ran towards them faster than before. Asuma moved to intercept the revived shinobi, but he disappeared in the Jounin felt a knee to his stomach. He gasped and fell to the ground as Kinkaku rushed towards the younger Konohanin. Naruto tried to avoid the man's clothesline, but he couldn't react fast enough and was knocked over by the attack. However, when the blonde hit the ground he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The Kumonin heard the distinctive hiss of another exploding note and leapt away, but the radius of this blast was twice as big and the fire engulfed the revived shinobi once more before the shockwave sent him tumbling. As he rolled across the grass Asuma landed in front of him and expelled a cloud of ash while saying, "Katen, Haze Kishu, fire release, ash pile burning." A thick cloud of black smoke engulfed Ginkaku before the Konoha Jounin pulled out his lighter and flicked it. A spark ignited the volatile ash and created another explosion that shook the area. When the dust cleared, the Kumonin appeared unharmed and was glaring angrily at the two-leaf shinobi, specifically the Jounin. Don't get cocky. The revived ninja disappeared and Asuma coughed up blood when the undead shinobi reappeared with his fist in the brown-haired man's stomach. The Sarutobi cigarette dropped to the ground as Kinkaku pulled his right arm back and delivered a powerful cross to the man's chin. Orochimaru frowned as he watched Asuma stand up. The Sarutobi kept ruining his fun. He took a field trip to test Naruto's growth, but that was impossible with the Jounin around. The Serpentine man could tell the blonde was skilled with futon jutsu, had a firm grip on tactics, wielded his saber capably, and possessed several interesting techniques, but he wouldn't see the Jinchuriki's limits with the training wheels on. The traitorous member of the Sannin focused his attention on the link he shared with Ginkaku before red and black chakra that matched the cloak of the pseudo Jinchuriki exploded from his body. The vital chakra covered the shinobi's muscular frame as five tails spouted at the base of his spine. The transformed bandit tied the Kumonin warily and jumped away when he burst forward, but the four-tailed man couldn't escape and Ginkaku's claws grabbed him. The revived shinobi roared as he pulled with both arms, and moments later he tore the inferior pseudo Jinchuriki apart and threw the pieces aside. The red and black cloak faded as the halves flew through the air, revealing the 7-foot bandit's desiccated corpse. The tails behind Ginkaku disappeared along with the chakra cloak while he stared at the Konoha Jounin regaining his feet. Asuma looked at the dangerous shinobi and pulled out his trench knives before coating them with futon chakra. Naruto realized he was on his own and looked back towards the mansion. Hurry up, you guys. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.